If you are stuck overthinking decisions, going back and forth, you are not alone. I've worked with leaders who looked confident on the outside but were paralyzed internally. In this video, I will walk you through an easy 5-step system to help you start feeling confident you're making the right decisions. Here is what I've noticed after years of working with leaders at every level. The ones who struggles most with decisions aren't the ones who lack intelligence or experience. They are the ones who don't trust themselves. And that is not a skills problem. That is not a strategy problem. That is an identity problem. Because here is what is true. How you decide reveals who you believe you are. A leader who sees themselves as capable, clear, and accountable, they move. They are not reckless, but they move. A leader who is still unsure of who they are in the room, they hesitate. They overthink. They go back and forth and ask one more person and run one more scenario. And meanwhile, the window closes. Today, I want to give you two things. First, I want to show you why this is happening, not from opinion, but from actual psychology research. And second, I want to hand you a framework I've used personally and with the emerging leaders I coach called P.A.U.S.E, a 5-step system that cuts through the noise and gets you moving with confidence. Let's get into it. So, why leaders overthink? Why do you overthink? Why do I overthink? Let me start with something that might surprise you. Overthinking isn't a concentration problem. It is not even a stress problem. At its roots, overthinking is what happens when your identity and your decisions are in conflict. And here's what I mean. Social psychologists have studied something called cognitive dissonance, and the finding is fascinating. When what you do doesn't match what you believe about yourself, your brain experiences real discomfort. It goes into a kind of loop, searching for resolution. So when a leader says, I make bold moves, but then freezes when it's time to actually make one, their mind doesn't just move on. It spins. It tries to reconcile the gap. And that spinning, that is what overthinking feels like from the inside. There is also something called heuristics, mental shortcuts your brain uses to move faster. We all use them. They are actually helpful. But when those shortcuts are built on a shaky sense of self, when you don't have clarity on who you are as a leader, your shortcuts start misfiring. You make snap judgments you later regret. Or worse, you distract your own instincts so much that you stop making calls at all. And here's the one that I think is most powerful and most underused in leadership development: identity-based motivation. This is a social cognition theory, and the core idea is worth knowing and internalizing. You act in ways that match who you believe you are, not who you want to be, not who your title says you are, who you believe you are at the level of identity. A leader who sees themselves as a builder of people, they invest in their team almost automatically. It doesn't take discipline or reminders. It is just what builders do. A leader who sees themselves as decisive, they move, not because they have better information, not because decisions are easier for them, because acting decisively is consistent with how they see themselves. This is why I don't just teach frameworks, I teach identity first. Because a framework in the hand of someone with an unclear identity is just another thing to overthink. And actually, I want to pause here for a second, because if what I just said is landing for you, there is something I want you to have. If you are a leader or aspiring leader who feels like you are working hard, but not fully clear on where you are going, this is for you. The Free Leader Identity Audit will help you clarify your direction, uncover what is really holding you back, shift how you see your leadership, and give you a practical path forward while addressing the doubts that might be keeping you stuck. It takes less than 10 minutes. And by the end, you will know exactly what to do next. Download it in the description below. Now, back to the psychology. So, we've established that identity shapes behavior, but there are a few more forces working under the surface that leaders need to know about because they are quietly running the show. Cognitive biases. These are thinking errors your brain makes when it leans too hard on assumptions or emotions. One of the most common is confirmation bias, favoring information that already agrees with what you believe. A leader might dismiss a team member's idea not because it is flawed, but because it came from someone outside their inner circle. That is bias in action. And it doesn't just hurt the team member, it limits you because you just filtered out information you might have needed. Next, in group bias, we naturally favor people who look, think, and communicate like us. It feels like good instinct. It is actually a blind spot. Over time, it narrows your perspective and weakens the quality of your decisions without you even realizing it. And then there is something I find fascinating called self-signaling. Every decision you make sends a signal to yourself about who you are. When you consistently keep a commitment, you're not just completing a task. You are reinforcing the belief, I am someone who follows through. And that belief compounds. Small, consistent actions made well, made with integrity, build a leadership character that becomes nearly unshakable. Now, here is the insight that ties all of this together. Great leadership is not just about what you do. It is about how you think, who you believe you are, how you justify your actions, and who you surround yourself with. The strongest leaders don't just manage others. They manage their own thinking first, which brings me to the moment that made all of this real for me personally. A while back, I was leading a high-stakes project for the SaaS branch of our company. The product was ambitious. The opportunity in the market was real. And then reality set in. The deadline was tight, tighter than we'd anticipated. And as we built, we realized that to stay competitive in a market moving faster than we expected, some significant adjustment needed to be made. Adjustment that would take time we didn't have. So I was facing two choices: miss the deadline entirely and miss our window in the market, or ship the product at 90% completion and compete with what we had. Then iterate based on real feedback. Neither felt clean. Both had risk. And I felt that pull, that familiar pull, to go back and forth, to run more scenarios, to wait for more certainty. But I didn't wait. I used P.A.U.S.E, the P.A.U.S.E framework, and it saved the day. Let me walk you through exactly how. So, here's the P in P.A.U.S.E, position. Who am I in this decision? The first thing I did was to stop and ask, who am I in this? Not what are my opinions, not what do numbers say. Who am I? I'm the leader of this project. I carry accountability for the outcome. I believe in shaping real things into the world, not waiting for perfect. I've made hard calls before and stood behind them. When you know your position, your identity in the room, you instantly cut out half of the noise. You are not deciding as someone who is unsure. You are deciding as someone who knows what they stand for. Too many leaders skip this step. They go straight to the data. But data in the hands of a leader who doesn't know their own position just creates more confusion. Start here every time. Next is A, alignment. Does this align with my purpose? our purpose for the company? The second question I ask, does shipping at 90% align with what we're actually here to do? Our purpose wasn't perfection. Our purpose was to build something that served real people in a real market. A product in a drawer doesn't serve anyone. Alignment is the filter that eliminates noise. When you know your purpose as a leader, as a team, as an organization, decisions that conflict with it becomes obvious. And decisions that serve it become easy to defend, even when they are uncomfortable. Here's the question worth sitting with before your next big decision. Is this choice moving me toward what I'm actually building? Or is it a detour disguised as progress? If it is not aligned, no amount of strategy will make it the right move. Next is you, understanding what are the real options and consequences. This is where I did the hard work of thinking, not spinning, but thinking. I resisted the trap of binary thinking. The choice wasn't simply ship or don't ship. When you force yourself into either or decisions, you almost always miss better solutions hiding between the two options. I asked, what happens if we ship at 90%? What is the actual downside? What happens if we delay? What is the real cost? Are there ways to mitigate the gaps in the product post-launch? Can we be transparent with users about what is coming? I also asked myself, what will a great leader do here? If I were advising someone else in this situation with no emotional attachment, what will I tell them? That question cuts through the fog every single time. When you step out of the emotion and become your own advisor, you access clarity you didn't know you had. Understanding means doing the real thinking, not the anxious looping, but the deliberate, structured examination of what is actually true. And next is strategy. What is the wisest move long term? Here is what people missed about decisions. A good decisions today that you don't manage is still a bad outcome. I didn't just ask, what should I do now? I asked, what is the decision I can execute and manage well over time? We shipped at 90%, but built into that decision was a strategy, clear communications with early adopters, a fast follow roadmap, defined ownership for the gaps, and checkpoints where we course correct based on real data. Strategy isn't just choosing the move, it is mapping what comes after the move. Courage is more important than certainty, but courage without a plan is just impulse. The most decisive leaders I have made aren't people who make fast gut feel calls. They are people who make fast, thoughtful calls and then own what comes next. And last but not least is E for execution, acting with conviction. We delivered the product on time at 90%. And here's what I know for certain. A decision that is made and managed with full conviction will almost always outperform a perfect decision that is executed with hesitation. Execution is not just the final step in the process. It is the proof of everything that came before it. When you've positioned yourself, aligned with your purpose, understood your options, and built a strategy, you don't execute with anxiety. You execute with conviction. No second guessing, no looking back every 5 minutes to see if you've made the right call. You made the call, now you manage it. You own it. You course correct as needed, but you move. That is the P.A.U.S.E framework. And it works not because it gives you certainty, but because it gives you yourself back in the middle of a hard moment. Let me bring this home. Overthinking doesn't mean you are weak. It often means you are smart. Smart enough to see complexity. Smart enough to feel the weight of consequences. But intelligence without identity becomes paralysis. The leaders who move well, who decide with both speed and wisdom, aren't working with better information. They are working from a clearer sense of who they are. Pause gives you a structure, but underneath the structure is a question. Who are you in this moment? Position yourself, get aligned, understand what is real, build your strategy, execute with conviction. 5 steps used consistently, not perfectly. And the more you use them, the more natural they become. Because you are not just building a habit, you are reinforcing an identity. You are sending signals to yourself that say, I am someone who decides. I am someone who moves. I am someone who leads. That identity, built one decision at a time, is what separates the leaders who last from the one who stall. If you haven't already, grab the free leader identity audit in the description below. It takes less than 10 minutes, and it will give you immediate clarity on where you are and what is holding you back and what your next steps actually is. One more thing before you go. Everything I just taught you about pause, the positioning, the conviction, the execution, it only works if you actually own the outcome. And that is a decision, not a personality trait you're born with, not something that comes after you feel ready. The decision to adopt an extreme ownership identity is itself an act of decisive leadership. You don't wait to become an owner. You decide to be one. If you are struggling with that, or you want to go deeper on what it actually looks like to lead from complete ownership, I did an entire video on extreme ownership here. Watch that next. Because the most important decision you'll make isn't a product launch or a hiring call or a business pivot. It is the decision about who you are going to be. Go make it. God bless.